Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the move of what if Deku kept secrets from All Might? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. The first time Izuku starts to suspect that he is taking advantage of a very serious situation is when he's cleaning the beach under All Might's careful watch. Contemplating it doesn't take up much of his time, and there isn't a squirming wrongness inside him when he realizes what is amiss, so he figures if his own moral compass isn't screaming wildly at him, there's not much to worry about. Instead he shrugs the feeling off, focusing on his workout routine and studies. He spends a lot of time listening to All Might talk of times of heroics and his own experiences as a former UA student, a school for the best of the best, and it becomes obvious over time what his expectations of Izuku will be. To become the next #1 hero, to leave his mark even though he is only a teenager, 14 coming on 15. To be a beacon of light that shines with a smile and a declaration of, I am here. To be the next symbol of peace. Izuku never tells him that while yes, he does want to be a hero that he wants to save people, that isn't exactly the type of hero he intends to become. Geary, Izuku flops down onto a stool, elbows on the table and hands under his chin in a way he has been told makes him look exactly like a young version of his father. Well, before what they had all dubbed the accident happened, at least. Is it bad of me to not tell my new mentor that his ideology and expectations don't align with my own goals? Kurogyari's form flickers, yellow pools narrowing. Has this mentor asked what you want to achieve in life? No. Then he does not sound like a very competent mentor. He isn't wrong, Izuku thinks as he jumps out of the way from a particularly acidic blow. Had it hit, his brain would have been nothing more than a pile of, acidic goop. He scrunches his nose up at the thought, his hand tightening slightly around the metal in his grip. A deep breath, loosening his hold again into something more comfortable. Really, All Might hasn't explained much past one for all being a transferable quirk and how if his body isn't prepared, it'll probably tear him apart if he tries to use it. But that doesn't particularly explain much. Sure, he has his suspicions of the origin of the quirk, but late-night discussions with his dad always gives Izuku suspicions and he doesn't particularly want to address this one right now. It's part of why he hasn't told his dad about being offered one for all in the first place. The man can be overbearing at best and a homicidal SDST at his worst these days, at least, which is a fine improvement. The man is supposed to be on bed rest, too, as loosely as the term seems to apply to him. One mention of spending time with All Might will, predictably, result in him either sending out one of Dr. Garaki's latest projects in human experimentation, or be attempting to murder All Might with his own hands again. Like it went so well the first time. The image of his dad fighting a deflated All Might, life support system in hand as the two toss and tumble like old men, is an amusing one. Even his suspicions on the quirk's origin doesn't explain exactly what One for All is. A transferable stockpile quirk? Yes. But what does it stockpile? Physical strength seems unlikely, though that is what All Might is making it out to be. One for All came about when quirks first started to appear. The fact, All Might is the 8th holder of the quirk. Another fact, if just the physical strength of the previous holders is what was transferred, then there is no way the strength of 7 people could have given All Might that much raw, brutal power. Of course, there is also All Might's own training and potential quirk to take into consideration some form of shape-shifting that allows him to alter muscle mass and general well-being, within limitations, rather than a full-body transformation, if Izuku had to guess, and how it would have affected One for All. There are other possibilities, of course. So many Izuku has already started a notebook dedicated to the quirk. A part of him wonders if he could just take it. But no, that would be rude to All Might, and a risk he can't afford to take, especially if he were to fail. What the F-kid? Acid Quirk Man asks, before snarling and spitting acid onto Izuku's baseball bat. That was his own fault. He'd zoned out in the middle of a fight and started muttering. It doesn't stop the way his lip twitched downward. That was his favorite bat. He'd managed to get it signed by Present Mike one evening when he had accidentally run into the pro hero on his way to baseball practice, an underrated pre-quirk-era sport that fell into a rabbit hole and died when someone used a telekinetic quirk to hit the ball so far it ended up lodged in a tree 50 kilometers away, and no one could complain because the rules never said anything about quirks, and since then was never updated. It makes a very convenient excuse when any hero catches him wandering around with his trusty metal skull-crushing stick, and had a nice talk to the man about his radio show, Quirk, and just how much of a fan he was in general. He sighs, taking in Acid Quirk Man and thinking even as he dodges another round of acid spit. Some almost nicks the hood of his limited edition All Might jacket, almost. He really should stop wearing his favorite hero merchandise when he goes out at night. Well, he isn't particularly in the mood to hold back anymore. His greedy little gloved hands almost always glove to hide the scars and small holes that mean something best left unknown, itch to get a hold of one for all, to see and feel what it is like to have such a mysterious quirk flow through his veins. For now he will have to make do with pulling out his notebook to write down more of his theories. But he can't do that around Acid Quirk Man for fear of his precious notebooks being destroyed. Izuku pulls on one of the favorite quirks in his arsenal, intent on finishing things quickly now that he's decided what to do for the rest of the night. His hand is outstretched and he pulls, and the villain seems to realize just how screwed he is as he's tugged ball first towards Izuku. Being able so draw small objects to oneself is such a useful ability. Oh well, that's Acid Quirk Man's own fault for trying and often succeeding to lure child into his unmarked van. An anonymous message and rooftop run later has one Aizawa show Yuta staring at a twitching, unconscious criminal tied up in a dumpster. Stuck to the man's chest is all the evidence needed to sentence the man to a life in prison. Show Yuta sighs, hefting the criminal out of the garbage and dragging him to the police station. He doesn't mind vigilantes as much as some of his coworkers. Underground heroics tend to blur lines, but he really wishes the kid doing this would come to him for help before he goes on the offense. He wishes the kid would stop giving him tip-offs on his nights off too. Yagi thinks he has made a good choice in choosing young Midoriya to be his next successor. The boy is passionate, determined, with a strong work ethic fueled by his longing to help people. Yes, he can see the boy going far, pushing limits and going beyond, a great hero from above, shining down on the world and casting away the darkness that lurks. There is something strikingly familiar about the boy too. But for the life of him, Yagi cannot place what it is. Yes, Yagi thinks as young Midoriya cheers in triumphant, Takoba Municipal Beach looking cleaner than it has in years. Young Midoriya will make an astounding hero. There is a nothingness around him, a vastness that extends throughout all that he is. One would call it darkness, a void with no end. But he has no concept of darkness, of the floating state he is in. At least not yet. Years later, if asked, he will say the darkness felt rather wet and slimy, and that it had a slight green glow, almost as though his own eyes were peering back at him. I'm not saying killing Endeavor is off the table. Izuku explains to a scarred and stapled man named Dabi, who he is 100% certain is the number 2 hero's missing presumed dead child. I'm just saying that if he is killed in a way that screams villain attack, his behavior will never be acknowledged, always pushed aside or justified. It would be much more destroying for him and hero society as a whole if, say, undeniable proof of what he's done were to be leaked on a wide-scale network. If enough people know, any attempt at a cover-up would result in a societal distrust that would fester and, with more leaks about different heroes, slowly destroy the faith the general public has in the hero system as we know it. The pause. This is all hypothetical, of course. Shudo and I are already working on it, he doesn't say. Mostly because he's pretty sure his dad is listening in through the TV, a not uncommon occurrence. The man might be retired, but he still sure is nosy and preening at his plan. Best not let the man know that was just one stage one of many plans Izuku has. It's always best to be prepared, after all. Dabi is staring at him with wide eyes, mouth parted. He looks a bit like a charred goldfish. His companion, A girl with a blood-related quirk who had tried to stab Izuku upon the start of the meeting and has been happily sipping away at a glass of his blood ever since he realized she probably needs it as sustenance and happily offered his own, is grinning from ear to ear, sharp canines and crinkled eyes. Most people would think the look is scary, villainous, but Izuku can see it for what it is. Genuine, endearing, and just that little bit insane everyone in the organization is. These two will be right at home. However, there is another man accompanying them, hunched and sharp-teethed, slim and dangerous. Formerly Stendhal. Serial killer turned hero killer. A paralysis-type quirk with unknown activation requirements. Intriguing. But this one is going to cause trouble for them. And they can't afford trouble. At least, not of this kind. He's glad Tamura asks him to help with recruitment sometimes. Something about him being good at reading people, and having an innocent baby face that resembles an anime protagonist, and so he must be good at winning people over. It can be risky, but so far the people who have come to the league have needed a place to be safe and belong. Ones like Stain don't CRP up too often, and when they do, the face mask and his natural white hair turned green for civilian life things with the help of a quirk that, well, changes the color of one's hair tend to throw off enough people. Tamura's argument of having a baby face is irrelevant when no one can see his face. If Tamura had been on recruiting today, he probably would have not only let Stain leave the room in one piece, but also allow him to join the league. His technically na brother and supposedly na business associate isn't the best at knowing when to not invite serial killers with a history of killing criminals into his home. It's a good thing Tamura isn't here today then. Clench your buttocks and yell smash. Izuku has a sinking feeling he is going to fail the physical aspect of the entrance exam. After being given one for all the night before, a sleepless night with one of his trusty baseball bats not his favorite, after Acid Quirk Man, the remains of that one have been buried in the small backyard behind Kurojire's bar, food offerings for stray cats placed neatly on top of it, tears had been shed and a morning spent with his doting dad reassuring him that, yes, son, you look perfectly presentable for a day at the top hero school, you'll do exceptional, and I know you'll get into the general education course with full marks, and no matter what happens I will be very proud of you. Izuku decidedly does not point out that the man doesn't have eyes anymore. It's been a bit of a sore spot for his dad after the accident. He once overheard him crying to Dr. Garaki about how he'd never get to see his son grow up. It's not like he doesn't have an abundance of sensory quirks to act as a replacement for his eyes or anything. His dad can be so dramatic at times. Izuku is pretty sure there's something more NTMT going on with his dad and the doctor, but he isn't going to push for answers. Not when the man gives Izuku so much space and freedom and trust to do whatever he wants. No vaulting for him, thank you very much. It's the only reason his dad hasn't figured out about his meetings with All Might yet, though Kurojire has been giving him some suspicious looks every now and then. All Might had also had the uttermost faith in Izuku, albeit for different reasons. Reasons Izuku is beginning to think were just the hero's own narrow-mindedness, if the robot's reigning terror on student hopefuls is anything to go by. Not only is this test so obviously setting up anyone with a non-destructive quirk for failure, Izuku notes with dismay that there are no pro-heroes on standby close by if any accidents were to happen. Surely, with a bunch of panicking and desperate teenagers running amok in a simulated city with quirks and robot parts flying every which way, incidents are expected to occur. Incidents such as a student being trapped underneath rubble as what has to be the zero-pointer closes in on her. Close enough that Izuku knows if he doesn't do something, the girl is going to be crushed by the giant robot. One for All has been distant, jaded digesting, one might even say. Izuku has been able to feel its attempts to settle in amidst the mass of other quirks all day, trying to find its place amidst the vast sea that is All for One. It has been letting off a feeling of confusion, of fear, muted though it may be, and he wonders if there is a sentient aspect of the quirk, but it's a stockpile and the implications. But in that moment, watching the robot draw closer and closer to the trapped girl, and noting how everyone else is running away, Izuku feels his new quirk snap into place. A well of power amidst his already vast horde is called forth and he's moving, calling upon that power without a second thought as he leaps towards the robot. Surprisingly, All Might's advice does help. Unsurprisingly, following said advice in the spur of the moment leaves him falling through the air with limbs shattered and a robot blown to bits tumbling down beside him. As he falls, he is grateful his dad convinced him to take a self-healing quirk, one from the man's own arsenal once he figured out that the kids at school weren't playing nice. He tries not to think about how if his dad had still had that specific quirk in his fight against All Might, things would have gone very differently. He doesn't like to think about that. Izuku lets himself fall, even as his bones snap back into place and his skin and muscles heal. The pain remains, the drawback of this quirk a phantom of his injuries. He has no other quirk to combat. He's falling from pretty high up and he should probably catch himself, but there are undoubtedly cameras on him and really, he'd much rather hit the ground and heal from what would, for anyone else, be death or something very close to it, then deal with the fallout from revealing any other quirks. Maybe he should take a nap. Being conscious when he hits the ground doesn't sound very fun. Slept. Oh, now he's floating. He opens his eyes, looking at the outstretched hand in front of him, then to the girl still trapped, looking terrified and about ready to throw up. He feels weightless, so it's not telekinetic gravity? Interesting. 5-fingered activation by the looks of it. His hands twitch underneath gloves, wanting to reach out. Tamura says he has a hoarding problem. His dad says it's to be expected, followed by an in-depth discussion between father and son about the mental affects that come with quirks and the way they present themselves. Gravity returns in a rush. He drops safely to the ground as the gravity girl loses her lunch near his feet. "Thank you," he says. She gives him a weird look, like she can't believe he's the one saying that. Izuku is itching to talk to his dad about the physical test for the hero course entrance exam. To pick it apart piece by piece and learn more about the evolution of the hero school system. Having a parent that's over 200 years old has to have some perks, right? Except he doesn't ask, because, well, the man doesn't know he's applied for anything more than general education. Oh well, he'll tell him eventually. Uno Beach. Go fish, flame fucker. Izuku squints at Tamura and Dabi. They're playing Connect 4. Himiko giggles next to him, holding his hand gently in her own as she paints his nails a forest green. The Numu in the corner that has a build suspiciously like Stain sits to the side like a gangly gargoyle. The new recruits are fitting in quite well. In that moment, everything feels as it should be. The first thing Izuku notices when he enters the classroom is that Kaken is there. He hasn't seen Kaken in years. A pool of dread sets heavy in his stomach, but years of experience doing vastly illegal yet arguably not immoral things in alleyways in the dead of the night has him pushing it away, ignoring the explosive blondes shouting and snarling at him to instead focus on the second thing he notices. The more important thing. He bounds up to the boy sitting near the back, a bounce in his step and green curls bobbing up and down as he smiles at him. "Hi," he says. And really it's an excited chirp, but he's never met the person in front of him in real life despite how long they've been friends online, so he feels his excitement is completely justified. "You're fucking Dever 1, Todoroki Shudo, right? I'm Almitspatrabit, but my name is Midoriya Izuku. It's nice to finally meet you." Dabi is fucking Dever 2, much to his dismay at not having gotten to the username first. Izuku thinks he would be proud to know his brother hates the man as much as him. No one has been able to figure out who the original fucking Dever is yet, and it's a mystery they all want to get to the bottom of. He holds out a hand to the startled boy, before the other seems to flush lightly and accept the handshake. The encounter gives Izuku warm feelings. It's great to finally meet his partner for Project Take Endeavor down and probably destroy Hero Society in the process. Sho Yuta knows this year's class is going to be a nightmare. He's reviewed the footage of all of their physical exams, knows who to look out for the most. The Bakugo kid is at the very top of his list, with a destructive quirk and no sense of preserving others' safety. High scoring but dangerous with an attitude to match. There is so much potential in him, but so just as much for him to become a villain. Or even worse, a hero with as little care for, well, heroics as say Endeavor. At least villains can be arrested. He's observed the way Bakugo has interacted with the other classmates from the comfort of his sleeping bag, the Ida kid scolding him and the rebellious nature he displays with an air of self-righteousness. He's going to need to start drinking more coffee to deal with these two kids alone. Then he notes the way Bakugo reacts to the other top of his list kid in his class, falling not far behind Bakugo himself. Midoriya Izuku. He'd spent the majority of his exam running around, falling behind. It had almost been like he hadn't had a quirk at all. And then he took out the zero-pointer with a strength eerily reminiscent of All Might, who had been standing beside Shoyuta at the time, smile wide and teeth a blinding white, had no physical drawbacks par the pained expression on his face, even though by all logic of the universe a teenage body should not be able to contain that much raw, uncontrolled power. To top it off, the kid had refused to see Recovery Girl and wandered on home with a casual wave of his hand. Shoyuta can already see how this one is going to be a problem child. It doesn't help that there is something suspiciously familiar about him. Bakugo is volatile towards Midoriya, fists clenched as though in any other setting he would have raised it, ready to strike with anger and venom in every word he speaks. And Midoriya, a smart kid, just walks right on past Bakugo. Only to walk directly towards the third-ranking kid on his list, the youngest Todoroki sibling, cold and closed off in a way that is more a defense mechanism than arrogance, and it becomes obvious very quickly that the two know each other. Shoyuta is going to need a lot more coffee than usual this year. Izuku takes one look at the ball, then one look at his teacher. Back to the ball. Part of him is internally screaming because it's Eraserhead, oh my god. And the other part of him is screaming because oh shit, my teacher is Eraserhead. There is a risk here that Eraserhead will try and erase his quirk. Something so flashy and destructive as All Might levels of power, not that he'd go all out, not after the entrance exam incident. He was sore for days, should not be used on a track field, even at the most prestigious school in the country. He could try and use less power. He has been practicing, but he doesn't have complete control over the quirk, and there's just something so unwilling in the way it acts, like it doesn't want to be used by a mini-all for one. It's definitely sentient, though Izuku hasn't figured out a way to interact with it, and given its heroic history, the core of the problem is probably the technically villainous activities he partakes in on a day-to-day basis. Whenever he visits Dad these days, the quirk sends him very panicked Flurry-Wadinger signals, which probably also has something to do with it. He ignores the warning, of course. Dad would never hurt him. There is also the problem of his hair color quirk. Would Erasure only cancel out one of his quirks at a time? It's unlikely, though he doubts the man has had a chance to test his quirk on multi-quirked individuals. There is a difference between quirks that have multiple factors and people with multiple quirks. Few though there are. The last time someone bought the topic up, Izuku went on a 5-hour-long tangent, PowerPoint presentations included, as Kurogiri wept in the corner as his bar was taken over for the night. It isn't a risk he's particularly willing to take, should his hair turn back to white. He could claim it was another person's quirk, technically true, but it's his now. But no, Eraserhead has to be looking at the person using the quirk. Izuku sighs, making his decision. He's pretty sure he won't be expelled anyway, and even if he is, he's got the league. He looks Eraserhead dead in the eye, smiles slightly, and throws the ball without activating any of his quirks. Not a single one of them. All in all, he does pretty well despite the lack of quirk usage. It doesn't surprise him. The tests are made to single out those with the more flashy quirks and higher fitness training, and not many of his new classmates seem to have a good grasp on how to use their quirks efficiently in the situation. Izuku finds it amusing, in a dark sort of way that threatens to uncurl and destroy society. People discriminate for the silliest things. Then the threats of expulsion are revealed to be a hoax, and Izuku almost feels bad for starting to prepare one of his plans to destroy UA from the inside out. Plan number 3 would have been so easy to enact on a Monday, such a shame. Eraserhead was testing them, he realizes, evaluating where each student is at in regards to physical capabilities so to hopefully better them. The method was uncomfortable, but it pushed the students and grounded them. Izuku makes plans to bring one of his bats to school to see if his teacher is willing to sign it and to maybe see if he can get Present Mike to sign one again too. Of course, the small confidence he has in the hero schooling system plummets and turns to dust during his first lesson with All Might. A battle simulation in the first week, at least half of his classmates lacking in any fighting training, the ones who do not knowing to hold back. 2 teams of 2, heroes versus villains. sticks drawn at random, the only supervising adult tucked away safely in a room somewhere to observe the battle, too far away if anything were to go wrong in an instant. And many things can go wrong in a single instant, especially when one Bakugo Katsuki is tearing apart the building with the intent of destroying useless, quirkless Deku. A good spotlight hero All Might may be, a qualified teacher he is not, and it shows. After an incident with too many explosions and the life of his successor flashing before his eyes, Yagi goes to Aizawa in search of advice, and to discuss young Bakugo. The underground hero just looks at him with tired, dry eyes. Underground heroes are always so tired, so haunted. Yagi has never understood why, but then he has also never been anything but a spotlight hero. When Yagi tells him the full extent of the situation, the man jumps up, snarling. We're going to see Nizu now. The three end up discussing the young Bakugo and Midoriya situation, and while Yagi doesn't completely understand where the line is drawn between rivalry and bullying in this instant, he begins to realize that he has mishandled the situation. As they discuss plans, teaching methods and resources for him to go over, it starts to occur to him that he has perhaps mishandled the way he has been mentoring young Midoriya, too. He'll have to make it up to the boy, do better. Plus Ultra. Izuku, Dabi starts. Can I have your help with something? Izuku perks up. Sure. What is it? I want to burn down Endeavor's favorite noodle bar without it looking like I did it. Is it insured? Yes. We need to make sure no one is there when we do it. It's been closed since 9, and no one should be there until mid-morning. Izuku looks to the clock on the wall, reading 1 o'clock. In the morning, of course. Sleep is for those who don't juggle double lives and have crippling coffee addictions. Okay, let's go. Himiko pipes up from behind them. I'm coming too. That was some explosion. It was a controlled explosion. It was pretty, just like Aiza's blood. That morning at school, Shudo pulls Izuku into a hug with a string of thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Cool, calm and collected as always, of course. Shoyuta is pretty sure the number 2 on his list of problem children is the vigilante/potential villain known as Hoarder, a name the kid himself had given him in a moment of panic when Shoyuta had asked, and then proceeded to regret having said, too bad for the brat that it stuck. He's had a few encounters with the kid, excluding the tip-offs to some of the villains he's been working on catching. Never seen the kid's face, always hooded and masked, but the stature and voice are similar enough for him to look closer at Midoriya. It could also be the baseball bat the problem child is holding out to him, asking him shyly if he'd be willing to sign it with an explanation of, "Present Mike signed my last one, and it got destroyed when I was, playing baseball with some friends, yeah, that. And I'm planning on asking him again too, but that seems a bit ungrateful, but I also thought that you might be willing to sign it? You've been a really good teacher so far and dash. Midoriya is a terrible liar," Shoyuta notes. That doesn't change how excited the kid is, nor the admiration for his teacher that shines in his eyes like stars. It makes something in Shoyuta feel uncomfortable. Most of the brats in his class are cautious and intimidated, whereas the problem child seems to know exactly what goes on in his mind, is able to see him. It's disconcerting, but also warming, to know he has this kid's trust. It's almost like Midoriya knows him. Almost like he might be Hoarder. The behaviors of the two are similar as well. It isn't a theory to discount. Except Hoarder's quirk isn't a strength enhancer. Izuku opens his eyes to avoid, his form nothing more than human-shaped mist. There are dark figures around him, 7 solid and 1 flickering in and out of view. They each have a range of expressions on their faces, some more hostile than others. The 7th one in the line, a woman with a cape, just looks sad. The first moves towards him, his expression the kindest of them all. "So you're my brother's son?" Izuku opens his mouth to speak, to say in automatic, "It's more complicated than that," but the words don't come out. He doesn't have a mouth when he is nothing but fog in a world of dreams. Instead he just nods, and the first is smiling. It's a wistful smile. "You seem to be good for him. He's calmed down a lot. Less vaults." One of the other figures snorts. It isn't a happy sound. The first ignores them, continuing, "I'm glad to finally meet my nephew. He wakes up and he is 4. It's a strange feeling, waking up and being 4. There is knowledge in his mind but no memories, nothing that makes him anything but a blank slate, nothing that ever says he was 3, 2 or 1 even though he knows they surely must have come before 4. He knows how to count, how to talk and walk, though his feet are unsteady as he tries to waddle his way over to the man in a suit, and how does he know what a suit is? There are many big tanks surrounding him, towering over the small one he has been taken out of. He is insignificant when faced with such big tanks and the monsters they house. Even the man in the suit and the other man next to him, with glasses and a long white coat, seem to tower over his tiny form. Izuku thinks that being 4 is a scary age. He wants to wake up and be big like the people looming over him. He also wants to go back into his little tank where it is safe and dark and he doesn't have to be anything again. Izuku wakes up with tears in his eyes and the feeling of one for all opening itself up to all for one in completion. He was right, the quirk isn't a stockpile of strength, but of quirks and experiences manifesting as vestiges. Maybe even souls. How fascinating. It's still dark out, so he pulls himself out of bed, grasping mindlessly for the lamp SWs near his desk. Once the light flickers on, he pulls out his notebook dedicated to one for all, takes a pen in his hands unloved in the safety of his own home, and only then and he writes. Later, he will stumble down the stairs into the bar, his school uniform thrown on in a rush and tie half falling off his collar. Kurojiri will hand him his morning coffee to go, double shot, with a fond ruffle of his hair and a "have a good day," as Izuku runs out the door in a desperate attempt to get to school on time. He loves his family. In one universe, the USJ incident is a disaster. Blood is shed and children are traumatized by a group of villains set on destroying All Might. Eraserhead is brought to near death protecting his class, and All Might swoops in at the last minute to save the day, facing off against a monster designed for the sole purpose of destroying the weakened symbol of peace and, pushing beyond his limits, winning. This is not that universe. In this universe, as soon as Tamura steps out of the portal, sees the green mop of hair that has become the trademark of Izuku's civilian disguise, and realizes exactly who is with the heroes in training, he turns to Kurojiri and declares they're going home. He'd rather play video games than beat up a bunch of shitty low-level hero students, anyway. Tensions are high after the strange encounter. What was undoubtedly a horde of villains appearing, then leaving just as quickly, will do that to a group of teens and their pro-hero teachers. The kids are mostly confused, cautious and fearful. The only exceptions are Midoriya and Todoroki, Shoyuta notes. Midoriya looks more exasperated than anything, and Todoroki seems to be amused at whatever the green-haired gremlin is showing him on his phone. It hasn't gone unnoticed to him that what seemed to be the leader of the villains took one look at Problem Child 2, who is quickly becoming Problem Child 1, and decided that whatever plan he had wasn't worth it. At least, that's what it looks like at surface level. The villains have a warp user, however, and that means they could come back at any moment. It doesn't ease any of the tension Shoyuta is feeling. Today has been a mess. Then Midoriya is moving towards him, voice low and hesitant once he is out of everyone's for the most part earshot. Aizawa-sensei, he says, they aren't coming back. And Shoyuta lets himself believe the kid. Super Handyman 64. What? Super Handyman 64. What the fuck, Aizu? There is a perfectly reasonable explanation. All Might offered to give me one for all and it sent me down a right and just path of heroics, with the promise of becoming the next symbol of peace. Super Handyman 64. What? Super Handyman 64. The Super Handyman 64, actual. Super Handyman 64, F dash? Super Handyman 64, don't winky face me you little sheet. Super Handyman 64, I'm telling sensei. I guess that's fair. When the qualified authorities come to investigate the incident, Eraserhead doesn't mention Izuku's obvious connection with the villains with mysterious motives really. If Izuku has to guess, someone probably just got bored and wanted to snoop at UA. He should probably start talking about school more at home to anyone, even All Might when the hero comes raging through with an air of righteous fury and a determined set to his smile. Izuku is grateful for the man's silence. Not so much for the you will be explaining this later, Problem Child glare the underground hero is sending in his direction every so often. He's already going to have to explain everything to the league, not to mention his dad, though he supposes it was only a matter of time. Shoto is sticking to his side, radiating ice-cold protectiveness from every angle, daring anyone to come anywhere near him. It's mighty suspicious, but fortunately the investigators are too busy being baffled by the villain's actions to notice anything amiss with the students. The bus ride back to the school is filled with a quiet saturating the air that stems from unease. It doesn't matter, Izuku has a cool shoulder to rest his head on despite the bus full of warm teenagers, and decides that this is the perfect opportunity to get some sleep. He doesn't hear the coos and dias from the rest of his class on the journey back, nor does he get to see the way Shoto starts smoking next to him. Eraserhead stops him as he is leaving for the day, requesting to stay back for a moment. Izuku gives Shoto a reassuring smile and a nudge out the door when it looks like the boy is preparing himself to try and take on their teacher or make a run for it with Izuku tucked safely in his arms. It's sweet of him. When it's just the two of them, Izuku shuts the classroom door and shifts nervously to sit on a desk near his teacher. Said teacher is massaging his temples, looking for all intent and purposes like he wants to curl up and sleep then and there. Problem child, care to explain? Izuku sighs, slowly pulling off his gloves. The precaution if things go badly. But also a comfort, a sign of tentative trust. Izuku has never been fond of lying to the people he likes, and though their actual interactions are few and far between, Eraserhead does fall under that category. The movement isn't discreet. He knows Eraserhead is paying rapt attention despite looking like he's about to pass out on his feet. The man always looks like that. Maybe he should start bringing an extra coffee to school with him. He's sure the teacher would appreciate Kurogiri's coffee. It's the best diamond coffee ever. That is, if things don't soon become a massive mess that leads to him having to leave school forever and go into hiding. Eraserhead moves his head upwards with a frown as Izuku contemplates how to answer. What to tell, what not to tell. He is aware that, for anyone with the standard good and evil mentality, his life is a disturbing mess, that it would be easily justified to have him locked away somewhere, be experimented on, or to be put down. He isn't like others, he isn't really like the rest of the league either, or even his dad. None of it is something he can easily put into words. Eventually he decides on, it's complicated. This time Eraserhead is letting out a sigh, long and tired. His eyes move back down to take in Izuku again. The next question he asks surprises Izuku. It had never occurred to him that his teacher might think, "Are you safe?" "Of course I am," Izuku says, wincing at how quickly his own words came out. That probably looks suspicious. He takes a deep breath. "I am really. And they're, well, not technically good people, but they aren't evil. They'd never hurt me. Or anyone who doesn't deserve it in some way. They're people who are hurting and who society has kicked out." Then quieter, "They're my people." It is of course at that moment that a suspiciously familiar purple mist forms behind him, pulling him further and further into it with urgency. A startled shout of his name is heard, he feels a hand grasp his own and suddenly both Izuku and his favorite teacher are falling through a portal into a very familiar bar. Today, he decides, has not gone according to plan. In fact, any plans he had for the day have been railed and toppled over each other like two freight trains colliding at full speed on a single rail. Shoyuta is really wishing he hadn't gotten out of bed that morning. Wishing he hadn't decided to follow through with Hizashi's excellent idea of becoming teachers together some years ago, too. In fact, he might be starting to wish he'd never decided to become a hero in the first place. This day has been an absolute disaster. And now here he is, surrounded by agitated villains in a rather nice, he has to admit bar located God knows where. With his now #1 problem child, the kid has shot so far above Bakugo in the last few hours. Shoyuta would cry if he didn't have dry eye. Midoriya has reached problem child with capital letters status. Given their wide eyes and combat-ready stances, it's safe to assume they didn't think he'd fall through the warp gate with Midoriya. He pulls himself up, placing himself between his student and the villains, readying for the inevitable fight and escape attempt that is about to take place. Priority 1. Keep the problem child safe. Then get them both out of here. Except Midoriya is probably part of their group, probably won't come along willingly. The odds of getting out of this alive and relatively unharmed. It's not looking good. Especially if his hunch is right and Midoriya is Hoarder. Kurogyri. Midoriya calls out from where he's been tucked away safely behind Shoyuta. Can you make us both coffee, please? The warp user, Kurogyri, flickers in acknowledgement, and the way the mist that would otherwise be his hair moves as he moves towards a coffee machine set in the corner sets off a wave of familiarity in Shoyuta. Why does he? Midoriya pats him on the shoulder with his elbow. A strange choice, but the problem child is always wearing his gloves and he isn't now, so it might be something quirk-related. Don't worry, problem child says before addressing the room full of villains. Everyone, this is my teacher, Aizawa-sensei. Please don't attack him, and Himiko-chan, I can see that knife. Remember, if you're hungry you can always help yourself to my blood, and you can always ask other people in the league, just dash. The girl with the knife and very sharp teeth. Himiko quickly puts the knife away with a whine, but she's smiling in a way that many uneducated people would liken to insanity, but Shoyuta can recognize a physical aspect of a quirk when he sees one. Though her eyes do seem a bit unhinged. Just make sure their blood is clean first. Himiko finishes, sing-song, like they've had this conversation many times before, as she wraps her arms around Midoriya like one might their favorite teddy bear, clinging like a sloth to a tree. Midoriya doesn't seem to mind, and the action seems to set the rest of the villains at ease. Shoyuta realizes that he might have a chance to escape if they're letting their guard down. It will be a slim one, but it's there. But he thinks about the girl clinging to his student, one with a quirk that probably makes her need human blood to live. And then he looks around the room, taking in burnt flesh and guarded eyes and someone in the corner, unresponsive with half of their brain exposed he is decidedly not looking too closely at, and realizes that he has seen this before. He's an underground hero. Of course he's seen this before, the way society treats people who are different, with fear and hate and violence, only to call it heroic. It's decided. He isn't going to try and escape. However, is it okay if I call my husband to let him know I'll be home late? He always lets Hizashi know when he'll be home late. Problem child nods at him. Of course. In any other situation, Shoyuta would have called the kid too trusting. But the way his eyes glow a faint green in the bar's warm low lighting, soft yet calculative and knowing, tells him that really isn't the case. There's something dangerous and powerful lurking under the problem child's skin, and the kid Dimon well knows it. There's something familiar about the professional hero who had been pulled through the warp with Izuku. Kurogyri ponders on this as he prepares the requested coffees, then a cup of green tea for himself. Something is tugging at his mind, in that way that things from before Sensei have a tendency to sneak up on him, on occasion. He shakes the feeling away. Who he once was does not matter, not when he has coffee to make and trouble-making charges to look after. Today has been a mess. But he would expect nothing less from the league. So, Izuku starts with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. Whose idea was attacking the USJ? He doesn't say the, I'm not mad, just disappointed, line, but it weighs heavily in the air anyway. Tamura and Dabi look to each other, then to Himiko, who sends a pointed look back at the two while snuggling further into Izuku's chest. Izuku raises an eyebrow. All of you? Himiko is the first to confess. I just wanted to sneak in and see what your school was like, Aizu. You never tell us anything about it, and I figured getting blood from a hero student would be fun. Her grin widens. These two came up with the distraction idea. Dabi just shrugs. I just said we'd need to make sure no heroes were around to notice the SWH. And I figured, Tamura starts, and at least he looks a little ashamed, that we could take out a couple of mini-bosses along the way. And the Numu and horde of villains that joined you? Sensei said that we should go big or go home dash. Right, of course he did, and that All Might was supposed to be there. He gave us the NPCs and that freaky half-brother of yours. Why do you always call them that? Izuku mumbles through the palms of his hands. He can't quite remember when in the explanation his hands had made their way to his head, but he isn't too inclined to move them. Especially not when Eraserhead is probably staring at the criminal organization he often tries to convince himself he doesn't co-run, like they're all a bunch of idiots. They aren't. Izuku knows this, he knows this deep in the depths of his heart. He knows. That doesn't stop him from wanting to curl up into a ball and hide away from the world for a while. He wonders if the doctor would be willing to put him back in one of those tanks for a few weeks. He knows, but we're all a bunch of disasters, aren't we? He's smiling behind his palms as he says it, warm and fond. Yes, today has been a mess. Yes, it's a mess he's going to have to clean up. But really, it wouldn't be the league if it wasn't full of human disasters. The first sip of his coffee has Shoyuta blinking in surprise. The second sip has something tight and constricting curling up around his heart, and it isn't poison. He hasn't had coffee this good since Oboro. It's made exactly the way he liked it, back in high school with a workload so large and expectations so high the student populace's only choice was to turn to caffeine in whatever form they preferred preparation for their up-and-coming lives as heroes who are never going to get enough sleep. His friend always drank tea himself, or energy drinks, but learnt with the determination only someone so good and caring can, to make DMN good coffee, the exact way his friends liked it. It hurts to think about, and surely it must be a coincidence. Still, he can't help but take more note of the warp user after that. His mannerisms calm and collected and so very different from what he remembers of Oboro, and there is no recognition in the yellow pools of his eyes to give away any possibility that he knows Shoyuta, but still. It's there in the way his quirk flows, so very similar to Oboro's clouds yet so fundamentally different in use. It's in the realization as to why Kurogiri's head seems to flow in a familiar pattern, and the fondness the man emits for his allies, the way he ruffles Midoriya's hair when the kid asks for more coffee. Shoyuta is very tempted to take the second cup from him. It's getting late, and if this is a habit it explains why Midoriya comes to school so tired all the time and why he's always up so late doing the various illegal things he gets up to in his spare time. Shoyuta thinks he might be chasing ghosts, seeing things where they aren't there. He is no stranger to grief, to loss. But there's something in the way the warp user cradles his own cup green tea, Oboro's go to back when they were younger, naive to the world at large that is just so achingly familiar, he can't help but wonder. Can't help but hope. It takes longer than expected, but eventually Izuku's phone buzzes. A quick look tells him it's exactly who he thinks it is, and with a quick reassurance to his teacher and a reminder to the league not to attack the man, he steps through a warp set to take him exactly where he needs to go. Eraserhead seems to be taking being surrounded by villains surprisingly well, excluding the weird, curious looks he's been giving Kurogiri every now and then. Izuku makes a mental note to look into that later. One impending disaster of a confrontation at a time. He steps out of the portal and into the dimly lit labs. Numu experiments surround him in stasis, their tanks giving off a green glow, one of the few light sources in the whole room. Izuku always thought that darkness was counterproductive, but Dr. Garaki and his dad seem to get on okay with their work, so he doesn't comment on it. There's a figure sitting in a comfortable chair, hooked up to so much life support that it must surely be impossible not to tangle all the wires and tubes. His dad can get along okay for a time without most of his life support, but that doesn't mean he should. Hi Dad. Hello Izuku. All for One says. There's the pressure of One for All screaming for him to get away. Izuku had hoped that would stop after his albeit one-sided conversation with his uncle? Well, maybe his dad isn't going to jump right into things. Maybe he'll. How is studying at UA going? Straight to the matter at hand, it seems. That's fine. There's a small part of Izuku that's worried about how his dad will react to him having One for All, that this will be the thing that separates Izuku from the man that is, very, very technically, not his father. That this will be the thing that makes his dad realize he's nothing more than a defective copy. No, they've had conversations about those insecurities before. There is nothing to worry about. His dad loves him very much. Well then, he supposes it's time to rip off the band-aid and reveal the untreated mess and broken bones beneath. Hypothetically, of course, all the bones he's broken with One for All have already healed. The hero course has been going great for the most part. It was really looking like I wasn't going to make it in because of the physical exam, but One for All activated in time and I managed to get in with rescue points, which seems a bit silly given that no one would have had any prior training in rescue, but anyway. Most of the teachers there are great, Aizawa-sensei especially, but I might be biased. He cares about his students, even if he pretends not to. He's like a grumpy caterpillar, and he doesn't seem too bothered with the league at the moment. I know you know he's in the bar, but that could change if they're unsupervised with him for too long. I've told you about him before, when I've run into Eraserhead. He even signed one of my bats. His dad chuckles, gesturing for Izuku to come closer. Izuku does, and is rewarded with a scarred hand gently ruffling his hair. I'm glad you are enjoying yourself. But I was under the impression you were applying for the general education course? The hand stills, and Izuku is pretty sure if his dad still had eyes, the man would be blinking rapidly. Did you say one for all? That's genuine surprise. Tamura mustn't have told Dad about that. Izuku decides that's probably a good thing. Best to break the news himself. Yeah, All Might gave me one for all. He explains, as though it's common for his dad's greatest enemy to go around giving villainous kids his all-powerful quirk. He what? Oh no, his dad looks stricken now. Horrified. Betrayed. Best fix that. Not to use me against you, Izuku reassures. He actually never mentioned you when he was mentoring me, so it never came up. He never mentioned me. Izuku pats his dad's arms reassuringly when he feels them tense up. He gave one for all to a child, not bothering to warn you about my existence. He thinks you're dead. Izuku points out. It feels weird trying to defend the #1 hero these days. It probably shouldn't, but never meet your idols and all that. That doesn't matter, and I know you know it. He knows I have had 200 years to gather allies who would be more than happy to continue my work long after I'm gone, and he didn't warn you at all? Nope. He pops the P. I think he figured, since you were gone, it would be safe to pick out a teenager and train them to be the next symbol of peace. Of course he'd want a mini-him going around, the idiot. A sigh. Why on earth did he choose you then? I can't imagine he'd have spent much time with you before realizing something strange was going on. You are a terrible liar. Izuku can't help but grin a little. The thing is, he never asked. About anything really. He isn't a very good mentor. I should hope not. The big bad all for one pulls Izuku closer with the assistance of some tentacles, a rather useful quirk for him these days. Izuku is held close to his chest, and he gently wraps his arms around his dad. I'm glad it's you. The thought of being forced to fight a child too brainwashed for their own good is not a pleasant one, though I would have to do it. Izuku nods, the thought turning something in his stomach. He smiles shortly after. But you know what? Aizawa-sensei noticed something was up with me on the first day of school. His father's laugh, hoarse and rusty, resonates through Izuku, and he is glad things have turned out all right. This Aizawa sounds like a decent teacher. The problem child returns to the bar with a smile on his face and a weight lifted off his shoulders, one no one would have realized was there until it had been lifted. Everyone in the bar seems to notice it now though. Even the person with their brain exposed in the corner seems to tilt their head towards Midoriya. A weight is lifted off Shuta's shoulders too, at seeing the kid back unharmed and happy. He wasn't sure what he would have done had Midoriya come back injured, or worse, not come back at all. Probably nothing good. Since when had he gotten so attached to the kid? Since he first realized it was a child helping him out with his job, and that said child was going around enacting vigilante justice in the dead of night with a baseball bat and a quirk the police still haven't been able to figure out the specifics of, only that it definitely isn't super strength. Really, the possibility that he's gotten two of his kids mixed up in the most awkward way possible still stands. So, the problem child starts, taking the seat next to him. What are you going to do now? Show Yuta blinks at the kid. He hasn't thought much about that outside of letting Hisashi know I'm okay and not telling anyone I've been accidentally kidnapped by a bunch of villain brats that are more hurt and traumatized kids than actually evil. I'm not going to tell anyone for a start. He should really choose his words well. I'm going to ask questions, but not expect answers from you aren't comfortable giving. I know there's a lot more to this than good and evil, and as long as there is nothing that pushes those boundaries into genuine evil, I'd like to be a support. If you'd let me. And he'd like to interact with Kurogyri more, though he doesn't say it aloud. There's something there, and he's going to get to the bottom of it, demon it. Midoriya is grinning by the end of his answer. White teeth shining and eyes warm. Okay. The kid says eagerly. What do you want to know? First, Shoyuta starts, allowing himself to slouch. You are Hoarder, aren't you? There's a crackling laugh at his question, and Midoriya sends the source of it a glare, cheeks turning red. The kid is flustered. Then in response to the laughing man on the couch, shut up Tamura, it was a spur-of-the-moment question and I panicked. And that is all the confirmation Shoyuta needs. It does, however, leave him with more questions. Tamura just laughs harder. It's a snort. It's not wrong though. Everyone's pretty sure you're worse than Sensei. At least he takes and gives. Sometimes. Hey! The problem child shouts in protest. I give too. If someone asks, and they really need it, and it's one I don't mind losing too much. Tamura gives Midoriya a look that says he doesn't believe a word of it. Tell me one right now, that you wouldn't mind losing. Midoriya pouts. That's not fair. They all have so many uses and so much potential. Okay fine, you've proven your point. He turns back to Shoyuta. I am Hoarder, and yes, I am a hoarder. No, I do not have a problem. Shut it, Tamura. Okay, next question. Shoyuta squints at Midoriya. There's an obvious, if next to impossible answer to his next question. He just isn't sure how to word it. You have multiple quirks. It comes out as a statement, and Shoyuta mentally curses it. What if he's wrong? It turns out that he is not, in fact, wrong. I do. Midoriya agrees easily enough. Then his face scrunches up. Not a quirk with multiple factors though. Behind the bar, Shoyuta notes that Kurogiri has gone deathly still. He wonders why. Does that make sense? The bar is oddly silent in the wake of Izuku's question, almost like they're nervous for his answer. He takes a moment to think, and as far-fetched as it sounds, it seems impossible, but it does make a certain amount of sense. The villains all let out a collective sigh at his answer. He thinks he hears Tamura mutter, "Thank if he isn't going to bring out the PowerPoint presentation again." He opts to ignore it. Midoriya is positively beaming at him, his eyes glowing a slight green not for the first time that night. It's possible. The kid explains. But it's also complicated, and I'm really not allowed to tell anyone about the main one, because if people learn that there's another person in Japan who has it, it'll put me in a lot of danger. And All Might told me not to tell anyone about the other one. All that does is serve to worry Shoyuta more. What does All Might have to do with any of this? Problem child? But, said problem child continues, clapping his hands together. If, hypothetically, you were able to figure it out on your own after I told you a story originating at the dawn of quirks about two brothers, and then All Might told his chosen successor to eat his hair to transfer his power on the day before the entrance exam at a very prestigious school, which will remain unnamed, having neglected to ask said successor anything about his hobbies or home life. Or anything really. Problem child is going to give Shoyuta gray hairs in the next year, he's sure of it. It's oddly reassuring to know that the villains hadn't known Midoriya had gone and acquired All Might's power either, given their disbelieving stares and gaping mouths. Does that mean that All Might's successor is the son of a 200-year-old supervillain? It's complicated. Shota isn't going to ask how it's complicated. He doesn't want to know. I'm going to go home, hug my husband and curl up in bed for at least 10 hours. Bye, Aizawa-sensei. Are you sure you trust him? Tamura asks after Eraserhead has left. Izuku nods. He knows what it's like. At Tamura's blank look, he follows up. He has a quirk that erases other quirks. Imagine how kids would have reacted to that growing up. Besides, as soon as he saw us all, it was decided. He cares in a way not many heroes do. He's adopted us like stray cats. The pause. And he signed one of my baseball bats. Tamura lets his head fall to the counter with a thud. The sports festival will be taking place in Dash. Izuku and Shoto share a look, then a nod. Endeavor is going to have rather high expectations of his youngest son during the festival. It's too bad the number 2 hero is going to be very, very disappointed. Izuku hasn't seen All Might in a while. Which is not a letdown, particularly. It's easier to avoid having to lie rather terribly or by omission to someone when they aren't even around to lie to. That doesn't mean the absence isn't felt, doesn't mean the dwindling admiration and fanboy giddiness he used to feel towards the number one hero isn't disappearing more and more. He does see his mentor? Once in the week before the sports festival. The man gives a speech about how important it is that he makes his presence known, a declaration of "I am here" to the world. To let them know that the next symbol of peace is soon to make waves in hero society. All Might never asks what Izuku thinks of it, and so Izuku doesn't bother telling the man he has the intention of doing no such thing. The day of the sports festival arrives, and the league sits in front of a TV with a bucket of theater popcorn and enough other snacks to feed a small army. All for One is even there, Dr. Garaki eagerly describing the events of the festival as they occur by his side. No one minds the commentary until the doctor starts getting distracted by how useful some of the students' quirks would be for his experiments. Mind control. Izuku's hands itch and twitch underneath gloves, even though he should be at his opponent's complete mercy. Even as he slowly gets closer and closer to the boundary line of the arena. The vestiges of One for All are waiting for him outside, though they seem to be encouraging him to turn back, to keep on fighting. But the quirk is so cool, he wants to tell them, it has so much potential. And what better way outside of having it for himself to learn about its potential than to be under its effects? But the lady he is pretty sure is All Might's predecessor gives him a get back in there right now young man look, and if he'd had a mother surely this must be what it felt like to be under her expectations. So instead of letting his mind think about the incredible quirk just a short distance away from him, he internally sighs, breaks one of his fingers, and carries on with the match. The finger is healed in less than a minute, and not for the first time Izuku wonders why his dad was ever willing to part with that particular quirk. But the match is over, and there is something far more important that has caught his attention. Then his dad's poor decision-making prior to the accident. That was so cool, he says to one Shinso Hitoshi with stars in his eyes. Can you do that to me again sometime? The league collectively watch as Izuku goes back up to the purple-haired kid after having pushed him out of the arena, and each and every one of them feels a pang of pity for the mind control boy. Except All for One. He can't wait for his son to come and discuss the quirk with him. The two sit opposite each other in the center of the arena. Izuku shuffles the cards, and Shoto gives him friend an icy look opposite him. The cards are dealt, the arena is silent. Confused. Disappointed. The audience came here to watch children fight against each other with flashy powers and competitive bone-breaking. Not whatever this is. Up in the commentator's stand, Shoyuta buries his head in his hands with a mutter of "problem children," as Hizashi, never losing enthusiasm, commentates what is happening below. 21 exactly. Izuku declares, throwing his arms up in the air. I win. Shoto, cool and stoic as ever, walks out of the ring. The cameras manage to miss the slight smile tugging his lips upwards. Well, that was something. Neither of them would do anything to hurt each other. Dabi explains. Shoto would probably freeze himself to death and take out half the stadium with him before even thinking about it. Izuku takes one look at a fuming, snarling Bakugo, turns around and walks right back out of the arena. He has no intention of fighting his childhood bully on live TV. The man in the suit and the doctor take him to a place called preschool. They look at him worriedly a lot of the time, and the doctor says that maybe it will help if he meets kids his own age. He doesn't know why they think that all he wants to do is curl up in his tank, or maybe even in the man in the suit's lap. He's done it before, but doesn't want to ask if he can do it again, is scared. So they send him to preschool, and he is suddenly surrounded by others his own age, and they are all curious and friendly. They play together and talk, often about what type of quirk they're going to get, some already showing signs of developing one. He can't tell them he already has a quirk. It's the one rule that is burned into his brain, a single command amidst the sea of freedom given to him. And he knows why he cannot tell, that knowledge is there too. It's dangerous. Danger, danger, danger. People will fear his quirk more than they will fear the method of his creation. So he pretends he doesn't have a quirk at all, even when everyone else does. And he pretends it's okay when all of his new friends leave him and call him a freak, call him useless. The worst of all though is Kaken. Having a close friend like Kaken was good for him, the doctor has said. It has helped him open up and learn to become a person, just like how he and the man in the suit and Kaken are people. Except Kaken gets a quirk and doesn't know he has one, and Izuku becomes useless Deku and the explosions hurt and useless, quirkless Deku. And it's around that time that the man in the suit gives him the healing quirk. Not long after, he is pulled out of school altogether. All Might confronts him after the festival. Young Midoriya, what was that? He asks, skeletal face grave. He looks like he wants to say more, perhaps to scold, but stops himself. He's trying, Izuku realizes. It feels nice to know the man is trying. It's also risky for him to let All Might try. It's why he never asked questions of the number one hero, why he was always content with the lack of communication and never pushed. Because while he has never outright lied, he has never shown All Might any more than what All Might has asked of him. And it is dangerous to do so now, when All Might is beginning to try. He wonders what caused the change. A desk covered in teaching resources and books updated to the latest standard and long nights reading through them all and feeling a sinking pool of regret. A supportive homeroom teacher and the principal of a school that is considered the best of the best, especially by teaching standards. That is what has caused the beginnings of change. But will it be enough? Maybe he can give the number one hero one thing, just one. Test the waters. He asked a question after all, and Izuku has been waiting months for him to do so. I didn't want to fight the person who, when we were younger, used to hurt me so often that for a while I couldn't remember what it felt like to not be hurt. At All Might's grief-stricken look, he hurries to continue. It was bad, but once Dad found out things weren't working at school, he moved me away. I hadn't actually seen Bakugo since I was 6 or 7, it's in the past. That still doesn't mean I wanted to confront him with the world watching. He's still so angry. All Might stares at him for a moment, looking grave. The look doesn't ease off even as he starts speaking. Young Midoriya, the past is in the past. I understand that it can be difficult, but you are both children and perhaps you need to move on. Your performance today will have greatly diminished your opportunities for an internship this year. And it was not just your fight with young Bakugo. The man grimaces, trailing off. He's trying, Izuku tells himself. You need to do better to be the hero you want to be, young Midoriya. Unspoken, but Izuku hears it anyway. You need to do better to be the hero I want you to be. What All Might doesn't know, and what Izuku so desperately wants to tell him, is that he never wanted to be a hero like him, that Izuku wants to be his own hero, in a world where what he views as a hero is so deeply not found in professional heroics. But once again, the number one hero never bothers to ask. Endeavor corners Shoto after his last match of the festival, flaming in anger. His teeth are grinding together, his fists clenched at his sides. Shoto knows that the only thing holding him back is the people still wandering around them, the risk that he might get caught by the wrong person in such a public place. I'm done. Shoto says, turning his back on his father despite his mind screaming at him that doing so is dangerous, and he walks into the crowd. Then through the welcoming mist of a familiar void. That night, he doesn't return to the Todoroki residence. Nor the next. Problem child, Shoyuta addresses, days later. Todoroki Shoto has been officially reported as missing. The classroom is, once again, empty at the end of the day. Do you know where Todoroki is? I do. Midoriya agrees easily enough. We had to enact an emergency phase of Project Take Endeavor down, which has thrown things a bit off track, but we should still have enough evidence to go through with Phase 1. It wasn't safe for Shoto to go home anymore. Well, it never was to begin with, but if he had gone home after what we did at the sports festival. Shoyuta has had his suspicions, but to have it confirmed so outright when previously the two had been tight-lipped about it is worrying. Why tell me now? Rather than before it got to this point? Doesn't need to be said. Midoriya smiles, and it's something sad. Because it wasn't something I had the right to tell, but Shoto said it was okay for you to know now. He was worried you'd try to do something about it, even though going against Endeavor wouldn't work legally. And DMN it all if the problem child isn't right. He wouldn't have had a chance to get a word in against Endeavor, let alone pursue allegations of domestic violence. The man is the number 2 hero. What's one family's suffering in comparison to his quite literal firepower? It makes Shoyuta angry, a deep and dark thing that makes him want to watch something burn. The irony is not lost on him. But that is only a secondary emotion, a reaction to what he is really feeling. Helplessness, yet another kid he is unable to save because the law will not allow him to. You care about all of us. Midoriya continues. Thank you for caring, Aizawa-sensei. The kid is moving to the door, pausing just as he's about to open it. Oh, and you should really start coming to the bar more often. Kurogyari hasn't said anything, but I can tell he enjoys the company of another responsible adult. So, little brother, want to go burn down Endeavor's second favorite noodle bar? Shoto blinks at the arm slung over his shoulder, then up at Dabi's scarred face. Sure. Shoto and Dabi stare at the absolute disaster in front of them. Chaos is flying about, smoke filling the air and piles of rubble are scattered across the ground. Not even 5 minutes ago had the utterly obliterated building been a well-renowned noodle bar. Someone is crying in the distance. You know, a voice from behind the two brothers calls out, startling them both. It's Izuku, wearing a hoodie. Shoto can see bits of white hair sticking out from underneath. He thinks Izuku looks very nice with white hair. And the air of power that always surrounds him. And the baseball bat. Shoto thinks Izuku looks hot with a baseball bat. Dabi says he has a crush, but that can't be right. He and Izuku are just very good friends, there is no crushing involved. His friend kicks a piece of rubble with his foot, it crumbles into even more tiny pieces. Dabi, I'm pretty sure when I showed you how to do this last time, I did not teach you how to do dash. He gestures wildly to the remains of the building, that. His older brother who he had recently reunited with and shed many cool, stoic tears with has the decency to look guilty. I figured I'd just add more of everything. The man shrugs. Especially the kerosene. Shoto is beginning to realize that all of the adults in his life now, minus Kurogyari, are rather irresponsible. Really, the USJ incident should have been his biggest clue. But then, Kurogyari helped with the USJ incident, now didn't he? Still, he doesn't want his best friend to murder his brother. He's only recently found out the man was still alive, he doesn't want him to die again. So he adds his 2 cents, they had insurance, we checked. His friend and definitely not crush groans into the palms of his hands. Right? And what about all of the other buildings on the block? Shoto and Dabi share a startled look. They hadn't thought about that. And the buildings surrounding the noodle bar are rather destroyed. Thankfully, all businesses in the surrounding area made sure to keep their insurance up to date. In a world where it is a very real possibility for someone to accidentally step on your house, or sneeze and set fire to your dining room, it is rather important to have insurance. The government certainly doesn't pay for support. We need to get out of here. Izuku continues. Especially you, Shoto, if someone sees you. Shoto nods, and allows Izuku's gloved hand to intertwine with his own before his friend makes a run for it with him in tow. Dabi watches the two teens run off, hand in hand, for a moment in amusement before he starts to run after them. Being caught at a crime scene like that would be a very, very bad idea. He hates to admit he probably should have followed Izuku's instructions from last time. Not that he'll never tell the kid that. He hadn't meant for the explosion to make such a boom. Hoops. Yagi knows, to an extent, where he's gone wrong. He knows his interactions with young Midoriya have been at first negligent, then misinformed. And then there was the sports festival. What a mess that had been. He'd said the wrong thing again, he's sure of it. Now with young Todoroki missing, his father's furious search, and the sinking realization that the boy might have been taken, All Might knows he needs to do something. Villains are coming out more and more, the strange occurrence at the USJ and the somehow even more baffling bombings further proving that noodle bars. Why? The world needs a symbol of peace. He needs young Midoriya to realize just how dire the situation is. He needs the boy to be prepared. More than anything, he needs the boy to be ready to face whatever comes out of the shadows. What are they doing? Tamura asks, pointing towards the brothers hovering over a laptop, the eldest typing furiously and the youngest pointing at the screen every few seconds. Izuku sips at his coffee. They're trying to figure out who the original fucking Endeavor is. Not of the first time, Tamura wonders how he managed to pick up a party full of children. He then shoves Himiko off the couch, causing the girl to flail as he uses his character's special move against his off-guard opponent. He's never playing pre-quirk-era fighting games with Himiko again. Especially not one so bloody. Super Mario is much better than Mortal Kombat, in his opinion. Hey there. The boy by the tree startles, moving backwards. Right, Izuku reminds himself, people like personal space. And not having practically strangers though really, in Izuku's books, their already friends appear almost out of nowhere. Mind Control Boy gives him what would have been a death glare had his quirk been different. But he isn't backing away. Izuku takes that as a win. Do you want to practice your quirk on me? You have a quirk that would be quite helpful in heroics, really. There's so much potential there, you could calm people down, de-escalate situations before they can escalate. It'd be really helpful in situations where people are losing control of their quirks. Often crimes these days are people losing control and causing damage. It has to do with an emotional stress they don't know how to cope with. You could help a lot of people with it. And really, that's just the lighter side of things, but you want to be a hero, right? I think you'll be great at it. Shinso just stares. Does the heroics kid even need to breathe? Oh, I could go on and on about it, and I'd love to try it myself someday, but I don't think I'd be able to bring myself to give it back dash. What does that even mean? So I probably shouldn't. But I'd love to learn more about the inner workings of the quirk, and really if the seventh hadn't given me a very disappointed look during our match, she's scary you know, I would have just let myself stay under your influence to figure it out. Missed opportunity. But I'm guessing you didn't know physical pain could counter it? Oh, but now I'm curious dash. Midoriya is a really weird kid. One day, the man in the suit and the doctor lose him. Their search is frantic, and he knows they are worried. They worry about him a lot, about the way he is developing, reacting, growing. He is not like the others before him, he is stable and alive, with the capacity to grow just like other people. But he came out of the tank numb, a blank slate. And then he went to preschool and school, and for a while, he was able to gather experiences. Then Kakken and betrayal and hurt, and it turns out that being just like other people hurts, too. Because he isn't just like other people, he's Izuku. The man in the suit is the one to find him, curled up in his old tank there is. No liquid filling it, no darkness to take him under, but it is still a familiar comfort all the same. The man slowly pulls him out, cradling him close. We were worried. The man in the suit says. He sniffles, liquid drops pool from his eyes as he buries his face in the man's chest. It's gross and strange, just like everything outside his tank. I'm sorry. It's the first time Izuku cries. Aizu, can I join you tonight? I want to go out as you. Of course you can. Oh God, there's two of them. Aizawa looks at the hoarders standing in front of him in the alleyway, one demonstrating to the other how to swing the metal bat in their hand just right to hit the average adult male in the ball. He decides to call it an early night. Izuku has always liked taking a hands-on approach. Sure, strategy is arguably his thing, but there's just something so fulfilling about being an active contributor to his own plans. Of course, this extends outwards into his habit of enforcing vigilante justice and snooping around places he probably shouldn't be by himself. Oh well, his dad has never seemed to mind, even after the whole was given one for all and applied for the hero course thing, and the league is very used to his antics. Besides, he looks to the Numu who was once Stain. Not the doctor's best work, but it's intriguing to see what has been done. How this new Numu can be useful with a foundation of a hero killer. He then looks to the exact replica of himself riding on the Numu's back, holding one of his less favorite baseball bats like it's a treasure. He isn't out hunting alone tonight. Kurogyari may have needed a break from the other Numu that had been lurking in the corner of his bar for the last few months and sent him out with Izuku for extra protection. The man knows full well Izuku can handle himself, thank you very much, he'd just rather not look at his less well-made counterpart every so often. Garaki's work on Stain was shameful in comparison, really. Problem child. Hypothetically speaking, if you uncovered a Yakuza organization making illegal, quirk-destroying weaponry, and then found out the boss has been keeping captive and hurting a little girl while also taking advantage of her extremely powerful quirk to make said quirk-destroying weaponry, what would you do? Problem child. Hypothetically, of course. Shoyuta stares at the message on his screen, fingers hovering. He's in bed with his lovely husband Hisashi, the other man stirring at the light coming from his phone. It's 2:15 in the morning and he would very much like sleep away the horrifying image of two problem children that, realistically, will haunt his nightmares for at least a week. There is a bubble at the bottom of his screen, showing that the person messaging him is going to keep going. Maybe he should offer some advice. Be a good hero and tell the kid to go to the authorities and let the pros deal with the situation. Except, no one has been willing to touch the Overhaul case since incidents started cropping up that could be linked to the man. He is too dangerous, and even the pro heroes are afraid to jump into action. That he's torturing a little girl won't change that. Maybe that's why he doesn't tell the kid to go to the police. Maybe it's the early hour, maybe it's his jaded views on the legal system. Or maybe it's his husband's warm arms slowly pulling him in close. Maybe he just isn't that good of a hero. What was that old meme again? Maybe it's Maybelline. Problem child. Never mind, I'm already holding the child, hypothetically of course. Have a good night, sensei. Shoyuta huffs. Stay safe, problem child. Overhaul is later found outside a police station, tied up, looking like he has been bludgeoned with a baseball bat. The Yakuza boss is a fearful, traumatized shell of his former self. And he has been rendered quirkless. Yagi's blood runs cold when Mesa contacts him frantically about that last bit. Tamura looks at the list in his hand, lightly scratching his neck with the other. He then looks to the line of people in the bar. Back to the list. Squinting, he reads out, "What is your reason for wanting to work for us?" After the incident with a little-known hero with terrible acting skills going undercover that he had recruited who only lasted 5 minutes before Izuku got back and ruined said hero's career, and the incident with the strange purple-bald SEC offender, and that one time he tried to recruit a very scary old lady who'd walked into the bar on accident looking for her pet fish and who was really more than happy to help such a sweet young man, but she isn't getting any younger, but she'll make sure to bring them a home-baked pie sometime. It had been decided that Tamura wasn't allowed to be on recruitment duty without consulting Izuku. Thankfully, the limited edition sensei, Gremlin form, wrote up a guide specifically to help Tamura with recruitment. The scary old lady still brings them freshly baked pies once a week. This is Eri-chan. She'll be staying with us for as long as she needs. Izuku, I've always wanted grandchildren, but I never expected you to be so irresponsible. You've never wanted grandchildren. Dr. Garaki says from where he is crouched down, examining the small, malnourished child that had been presented to him moments prior. I would know if you did. And neither of you know if I'm actually capable of reproducing. Izuku adds. Which, as always, thank you for respecting my boundaries and bodily autonomy. Oh, and by the way, Eri-chan has a quirk that can rewind organic material that's activated by physical touch, but she can't control it very well. The doctor doesn't give any outward response, but he is a bit more careful in making contact with the girl from then on, and I've got Overhaul now, so we have options in healing you, Dad. Your dad is hurt? Eri pipes in, voice small. All for one isn't visible to her, sitting on his chair, surrounded by darkness in his poorly lit lab. And my curse can help? It can. Izuku smiles at her. But only if you want to. She beams up at him. I want to help. Young Midoriya. The skeletal man addresses. The two of them are in an office adjacent to the teacher's lounge, a private space. The man's mouth is pulled down, his hollowed-out eyes and fragile figure only adding to the serious air he is giving off. We need to discuss some things about One for All. Himiko, disguised as Izuku, blinks. Yes. Don't panic, Himiko. This whole day has been good infiltration practice. It even has the Izuku stamp of approval. She'd been itching to meet his school friends and see what it was like, even if she couldn't go as herself. The only condition being she stay as far away from someone who looked like a skinny, unhealthy All Might. A shame Izuku couldn't join her, but having two of him around would be mighty suspicious surrounded by heroes. The skeletal man opposite Himiko tells a long tale of One for All and All for One, about a villain who can give and take quirks, about how his predecessors have all been hunted down by this villain, about how the skeletal man went up against All for One and thought he had defeated the villain, but that he is beginning to suspect that wasn't the case. You must understand, my boy, I had thought I'd dealt with him for good. However, there has been a recent incident that leads me to suspect that wasn't the case, and I worry for the safety of you and your fellow classmates. See, if it were actually Izuku sitting across from All Might, he might have asked questions to subtly push the man in the direction of the drag known as Trigger, which rather conveniently is connected to another drag that can permanently destroy someone's quirk, and also conveniently was something Overhaul himself had been working on. Perhaps he would have talked to the man about how there is a world full of different quirks, and surely there are similar quirks out there to the one a man developed 200 years ago. He would have explained his theories and pulled out one of those horrible PowerPoint presentation of his that still makes Himiko and the rest of the league shudder. Or maybe, being the terrible liar he is, he would have opted to throw himself out the third-floor window rather than risk saying something like, "Oh yeah, he's definitely alive. And I have his quirk. And he's technically not technically my dad." It's complicated. Really, it's quite fortunate Himiko is here today instead. Not knowing quite what to do but reassured anyway, she nods along to All Might. If the one-sided discussion about upping training regimes and spending more time focusing on mentoring and sending Izuku to go and train with someone who has experience with previous one for all holders is anything to go by, it doesn't seem like her choice in action raised any suspicion. The only reason it doesn't is because All Might never took the time to get to know enough about Izuku to be able to recognize when someone is definitely not him. Otherwise, the reassuring smile Himiko gives him would have given her away then and there. Instead, All Might makes a note to teach young Midoriya to smile in a way that is less happily murderous. Oh, when Himiko tells Izuku what happened, he's going to cry. She doesn't like it when he cries. It's much better when he bleeds, his blood is much prettier. Izuku does, in fact, cry. Just a little. So really, he's going to be getting even less sleep than usual now. Shoyuta stares at the shelves of tea, Hizashi chattering next to him. One hand is clenched around the handle of his shopping basket, the other is hovering over a specific brand of loose-leaf green tea. Hizashi pauses when he notices what he's hovering over. Shoyuta, wasn't that Oboro's favorite dash? His husband remembers. Of course he remembers. They all remember except the one person who doesn't, clinging to everything they can of their lost friend. And it's silly of him, really, to be thinking about this so much, especially after so long. But Shoyuta has been going to the bar for coffee whenever he's in the area, and he's been taking more time to patrol the area, and there's something. There's definitely something. He puts the tea in the basket. A gift for his new old friend. Izuku takes one look at Gran Torino lying sprawled out on the floor, turns around, and goes back the way he came from. The action is very reminiscent of how Tamura left the USJ. All Might isn't going to be happy with him, but then, what else is new? Young Midoriya. All Might says. As predicted, he does not look happy. I have been told you didn't go to your training session with Gran Torino. I didn't. Izuku agrees easily. Maybe now is the time for him to stand up, to straighten his posture into something powerful and commanding, throw on a perfectly pressed suit and tie and reveal to the #1 hero his betrayal. Except, it isn't really a betrayal. He isn't some evil mastermind set on destroying the world. He doesn't even like wearing suits, much to his dad's dismay. When 5-year-old Izuku pulled off a miniature replica of his dad's classic villainous overlord suit, threw it to the ground and kicked dirt all over it, the man had been in tears. Young Midoriya dash, All Might starts to continue, and it is no doubt going to be a lecture. Another statement of how disappointed the hero is in him. Something has to give. Something should have given a long time ago. All Might. Izuku cuts off. Did you know that one for all isn't a quirk that stockpiles strength, but one that stockpiles experiences and quirks? No, of course he didn't. The man looks baffled. I've been spending my spare time learning how to use each of the other holders' quirks. I've spent it training and learning, and I've been working on my physical body. Because the physical power aspect of the quirk will tear me apart piece by piece if I don't prepare myself before using it. He demonstrates his words by using float. Perhaps it's cruel to so blatantly use the 7th quirk in front of the 8th when there is undeniably a history between the two of them, something raw and ugly and shrouded in tragedy. But But Izuku is tired of this little dance. He doesn't leave the quirk activated for long, dropping back into his chair with ease. All Might looks even more sickly pale than before, like he has seen a ghost. My boy, the number one hero starts. Why didn't you tell me? Izuku blinks at the man, a smile tugging at his lips. It's a bitter thing, his smile. It was never bought up. You've never asked me anything, is left unsaid, but Izuku thinks he gets the point across. Something like recognition flickers in yellow pools as Kurogyari accepts the gift being handed to him. He takes the box from Shoyuta before setting it to the side on the bar counter with a thank you. They stay there in silence, Shoyuta sitting with the best diamond coffee in his hands, and Kurogyari behind the bar. The air feels heavy with something unnamed, a tension that shouldn't be there. A hesitance. Shoyuta is starting to think he has miscalculated, that he has been foolishly chasing ghosts and projected one onto his student's villainous associate. Then the warp user sighs, flickers. I used to know you from before, didn't I? And there it is, that spark of hope. I think so. Shoyuta answers honestly, because despite everything there is still a shadow of doubt, and what if he ruins some poor amnesiac's life by telling him he was someone he wasn't? You knew how to make my coffee exactly how I liked it in high school. It feels silly, now that he is admitting it aloud, what his suspicions are based on. I have flickers of memories, sometimes. Kurogyari explains. Things seem familiar, you seem familiar. But I do not want to know who I once was. I am happy now. Shoyuta blinks, something suspiciously wet in his eyes. Then that's what matters most. You deserve to be happy. Izuku looks up from the papers in his hand homework, because despite everything he does, in fact, go to school, and while Eraserhead sympathizes with his group of villains and nightly activities, that doesn't stop the man from giving him homework, looks back down at them, then looks back up again. Kurogyari, he says slowly, calmly. White locks of hair that really needs cutting fall into illuminated eyes, intimidating. Internally, he's trying his best not to squeal like the excited hero fanboy he is. Who let the number 4 pro hero Hawks into the bar? Before the warp user can answer, said number 4 ranked professional hero Hawks beats him to it. I followed that one. He's gesturing with the casual air of someone who, if it came down to it, could take down most if not all of the league in a fight, to Dabi. Dabi, who probably knew the pro hero was following him and just didn't care. Of course. The a-hole. And I'm here to join the league. Izuku sighs. The spy? Why the commission would send one of the top 10 heroes to spy on an, admittedly small but with a 200-year-old supervillain providing the funding, so perhaps not so small, criminal organization is beyond him. Especially a spy so obvious. Oh well, it's not like Hawks knows there's a person in the room that can take his quirk. Even just using one for all, Izuku is fairly certain he can be fast enough to get to the pro hero and take before anything too destructive happens in the bar. Let the recruitment process begin. What made you decide to come to the league instead of the other villainous organizations out there? The healthcare? Bullshit. Their healthcare is a doctor with an unhealthy fondness for human experimentation. Most people who go to him come back with their brains exposed, or don't come back at all. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Well, if I don't figure something out soon, as a very roasted chicken. And why is that? I've been stealing Endeavor's ice cream for the past 3 months and he's finally figured out it was me. On the couch nearby, both Dabi and Shoto crackle. Taking advantage of the opportunity, Tamura pulls ahead of the two in the game of Mario Kart running on the TV. How does Endeavor even eat ice cream? Exactly. He doesn't, just lets it melt and go to waste like a monster. What do you see yourself achieving in life, and how does becoming part of the league tie in with it? I'd like to see hero society crumble and villains take control of the world. Izuku sighs. The room stills. Kurogyari lets out a sound that's suspiciously word-like, "Oh God, please no, not again. I'll be right back," he says to Hawks, ignoring the others. A minute later he returns from his room, setting up his trusty projector and powering it on. One long presentation about villainous stereotypes and the impact quirk discrimination has on the rise of criminal activity, A definitely failed job interview and the discovery of Endeavor's missing son later, and Hawks is about ready to curl up into a ball and cry. Why did the commission give him this job? It doesn't matter. He doesn't tell anyone about the missing Todoroki boy, or about much of anything else really. The League is just a bunch of outcast kids. After all, there's not much damage they can do. Right? A day after his meeting with the kid at the League of Villains, Hawks gets a message. Unknown number, we regret to inform you that your application to join us has been rejected. If you are looking for alternatives, we recommend the Meta Liberation Army. They are full of corrupt government officials who would love to get their hands on a hero of your status. Sincerely, the League of Villains. The Meta Liberation Army. Maybe he can look into that. A small, quiet cafe. 2 teens sitting at a booth in the corner. One white-haired, milkshake in hand. The other, definitely not the missing Todoroki boy, just wearing a slightly off-center black wig with a cup of tea sitting to his right. The tea has long since cooled to his touch. Are you sure you want to do this? Definitely not. Shoto in a wig nods. I do. And you know that it'll be out there now, right? There's no going back. Izuku. Definitely not. Shoto in a wig says, voice fond. I know. He puts his hands over Izuku's, pulling them away from his drink and holding them gently. You don't have to worry. No matter how things go, you've already saved me. Okay then. Izuku says, a wry smile spreading across his face. I'll let Dad's technology guy know we're ready. Yes, All for One has a technology guy. Always keeping up with 200 years worth of technological advancements is very important for the supervillain. Even if he doesn't understand how to use the comments section on HeroTube. Holy shit, have you seen the news? That has to be fake, right? Nah, it doesn't look like it. That sheet, it's dash. It's being taken down, but keeps on coming back up dash. Why would it be taken down if they weren't trying to cover something up? For a hero to do something like that, it's dash. It's not that surprisingly, really. My ma's first husband was a hero, and she barely got out alive. Tried to take him to court after and everything. There was plenty of proof. And they didn't hold him accountable? Nah, heroes can get away with a lot these days. Shoyuta stares at the article on his phone. His apartment is oddly quiet, especially given that his husband is there with him. The TV is on, an especially brave news anchor reporting on the contents he himself is going over. It's evidence. Notes and observations and journal entries dating back since before the school year had begun, and even some during. All of it well documented, but nothing quite more condemning than the photos. Burns and bruises, some dating back 2-3 years. He suspects that it has been going on much longer than that. No, he knows it has been. Shoyuta. His husband sounds calm. Too calm. The man is as angry as Shoyuta himself feels. For the sake of Endeavor's ears and your brain, please tell me none of this is real. And Shoyuta can't reassure Hisashi, can't lie to him. Not when there is so much else he hasn't been telling his husband these days. Not when it involves one of his students and the horrific domestic violence revealed to the world. It's real. People talk, news spreads. Victims come out of the woodwork to share their own experiences. Hesitant at first, but once it becomes obvious that people are listening, more and more take a step forward. It makes it harder to trust heroes, plants seeds of doubt around every corner. Endeavor keeps his spot as the number 2 hero despite it all, though he is often even more aggressive, quick to anger. It does not help his reputation. The fragile trust the man has gained from people over the years lessens and lessens. Any chance Endeavor has in being the number 1 hero, in living up to something so bright and shining as the symbol of peace, is crushed. Because even when All Might retires and the man is officially dubbed number 1, all civilians will see is the face of a man who hurts his family behind closed doors. Though there will still be those who look at him in awe, in wonder. Those who justify what the man did as a part of the greater good. All it will do is create more divide. Still, Endeavor continues heroics despite everything. He declines questioning, especially in regards to his search for his missing son, and more people are beginning to look closer at Todoroki Shoto's case, and that means more people are beginning to think he wasn't taken, that he ran away. Not that it matters. The League will keep Shoto safe until the storm has settled and they are ready to enact Phase 2 of Project Take Endeavor down and probably destroy Hero Society in the process. For the time being, Shoto allows himself to relax, head in Izuku's lap as his friend drags gentle, unloved fingers through his hair. The motion soothing enough that he beings to drift off. He's safe here. I'm jealous. Himiko pouts. Dabi rolls his eyes at her. Izuku looks up at the two of them. There's enough room for you to squeeze in next to me. He pats the empty space on the couch with his free hand. Just be quiet and try not to wake up Shoto, please. He's had a long week. Himiko beams, quietly bouncing up to Izuku. She sits down next to him, and he wraps his spare arm around her, careful not to jostle the boy in his lap. She snuggles up into his side. A whisper into his ear. You're the best, Aizu. It is not long after that both Himiko and Izuku join Shoto in the wonderful world of sleep. It is not the first time he has seen them, the ones that came before him. The ones that were never taken out of their tanks. The failures. He has seen them before, but never before has he been awake enough to really notice them. Never before has he been aware enough that there is something so very wrong. The way their limbs are tangled and disfigured, pieces missing and misplaced. All bear a resemblance to him, white hair and pale skin, apart from the ones who either don't have skin or hair. They are the closest anything can ever come to being like him, but even then they are not. They never will be. They are empty shells, fragile beings with decaying forms. Twisted and ugly and hollow. Izuku is more like them than he is other people, and he wonders if that makes him not a person at all. But even they will never have the chance to be like Izuku. Izuku is the only Izuku. We were about to give up on this project, the man in the suit explains, but then, against all odds, you stabilized. I wonder, what makes you so different from the rest? You doesn't normally do parent-teacher meetings on a grand scale. You doesn't normally have to deal with the media fallback of it having a domestic violence incident involving one of their top first years seemingly go unnoticed and without action. These two facts are connected, though no one will outright admit it. Nizu is scrambling to prevent any more backlash before it has the chance to occur. What the scoop-hungry minds of the media don't seem to realize is that, up until the information leak, going up against Endeavor seemed impossible. That in most cases of domestic violence, UA handles them with professionalism, the resources to make sure their students are safe. And on the occasion they aren't able to something, often the perpetrators are confronted by a shady figure and a baseball bat these days anyway. It still is impossible to go up against the number 2 hero for the most part. Shoyuta has a sneaking suspicion it won't be like that for long. He also has a suspicion that the next few weeks of overtime are going to be an absolute nightmare. Parent-teacher meetings are coming up. Well then, All for One, back in his prime with a full set of hair and healthy, smooth skin, says, "We can't disappoint that homeroom teacher of yours, now can we? I've been eager to meet him." He's reacting exactly as Izuku predicted. That crosses out asking if Kurogyari or even Garaki can go instead. Time to compromise. Also, you look like you're in your late 20s and that might raise some questions, Izuku thinks. Knowing his dad won't listen, he says, "You're wearing a wig. And don't go looking for All Might to torment." Very well. His dad agrees easily enough. His dad is smiling now. This doesn't bode well. Oh well, Eraserhead was the one who said the meetings were mandatory, knowing full well he had a student with a 200-year-old supervillain for a parent. Really, it's on the underground hero at that point. Yagi sees the coverage of the leaked documents, and he seethes. He is angry at his fellow hero, a righteous fury only the absolute scummiest of villains have the unfortunate privilege to encounter. To think that the other hero would do something like that to his own family. That is not a hero. But he is also angry at the fool who put all of that condemning, calculated evidence out for the world to see. The person behind this is a villain, he is sure of it. A villain with a dastardly motive and the resources to back it up. Taking advantage of a horrific situation to further their own goals. The seeds of distrust planted, in a world where people should believe in heroes. Scales have been tipped, public faith in the inherent goodness of heroes is being questioned at every turn. Crime has yet to increase more than it already had been, But where once people were stopped by trust in the system, that things would work out okay, they are now stopping in fear. Yagi can see it. What Yagi doesn't realize is that people have always stopped in fear. They just aren't hiding it as well anymore now that their fears have been proven logical. If a hero of such high status as Endeavor can get away with doing that to his family, then what could he do to a petty criminal or shoplifter? And while he is angry at Endeavor, furious and disgusted, he knows why the man was able to get away with it. Why he still needs to be able to get away with it. He is the second most powerful hero in the country. They cannot afford to lose such a powerful hero simply because he has hit his child. Especially not when Yagi is so close to reaching his limit for good. Society cannot afford to lose its two most powerful heroes at the same time. The balance of power would shift, society would tip and change, and no one would be safe. Not when All for One is still out there somewhere. He pushes those thoughts aside, along with the fear that rises up with it. For now, he is going to work on his successor. He is going to make as much of an effort as he can to make the boy a hero. And if the parent-teacher meetings are anything to go by, he's soon going to meet the boy's parents. He promises himself he will take the chance to get to know young Midoriya better. Izuku pats the curly green wig that sits atop his dad's head, nodding to himself. He pulls away, walking around the man and taking in the slightly too tight hoodie the man wears. It was the baggiest Izuku had, in these desperate times, the tracksuit breathes, and the red running sneakers. The great and mighty All for One certainly looks uncomfortable in casual clothes. And more importantly, he hopefully looks unrecognizable from a distance should any stray All Mights catch a glimpse of him. Alright, you're ready? I look hideous. You look like me. This was a very last-minute idea, and it was either that, or the CRP top Dabi offered you. Garaki thinks All for One would look rather nice in a CRP top, but he dares not say it aloud. Shoyuta takes one look at Problem Child's father, one Midoriya Hisashi, and concludes that yes, this is an ancient supervillain with the full capability to destroy society as he knows it, probably with the just one wave of his hand. There's just something in the way he looks at Shoyuta with sharp red eyes that has the underground hero's brain screaming run fucking run, even with the young girl he has sitting on his lap, silent but wide-eyed and in awe. A hacking sound comes from next to Shoyuta. He turns to see Yagi coughing up blood, not a particularly unusual occurrence. The absolute terror on the number one hero's face is new. It's not often one witnesses All Might in a moment of fear. He told the man not to worry about joining in with the meetings, that they only needed to be done with the student's homeroom teacher. This'll teach Yagi about being nosy and not even bothering to bring a coffee offering with him. Shoyuta could really use some coffee right now. He wonders if Kurogyari would warp him one if he messaged. He probably would, the great friend that he is. The Problem Child looks like he's trying to hide how startled he is by the presence of All Might, as though the strategist of a criminal organization didn't take into consideration the possibility that his hero mentor might want to meet his father. Knowing how poor of a teacher Yagi is through weeks of working with the man, it doesn't particularly surprise Shoyuta that that is the case. There is a tense moment where Shoyuta realizes that Yagi looks about to buff up and go plus ultra. On the Problem Child's father's face. The action is stopped when Midoriya Hisashi holds out his hand to Shoyuta. Shoyuta, knowing full well how All for One takes quirks, accepts the handshake in a probably foolish, but he's too tired for this sheet sign of trust. He's fairly sure Midoriya's father doesn't intend to take his quirk. Mostly. Hopefully. Not probably. It's wonderful to finally meet you. I've heard many good things from my son about his homeroom teacher. I'm Midoriya Hisashi, and this is my lovely granddaughter Eri. Aizawa Shoyuta. Abrupt. Tired. By the end of the handshake, it doesn't feel like his quirk has been taken. That's good. Shoyuta nods towards a horrified All Might. This is my coworker and fellow teacher, Yagi. The pause. Then he adds, he's new. The supervillain's lip tips upwards in amusement. He's making a good first impression by throwing Yagi under the bus. Good. The Problem Child looks torn between wanting to laugh and cry. I do apologize for my state of dress. The supervillain says, and politely, sincerely apologetic at that. Someone insisted I go without my usual suit and tie. He gives the problem child a pointed look, probably to say, "See? It was pointless trying to make me less identifiable from a distance when All Might has ended up sitting right across from us." Midoriya puts his head in his hands as Yagi falls victim to another coughing fit. Now the supervillain in the room just looks smug. Shoyuta is becoming more and more tempted to send Kurogyari a message. The warp could bring some much-needed coffee, possibly even some alcohol, and maybe even advice on how to rein in his boss before a city-leveling fight breaks out. "It's fine," Shoyuta reassures. "You are far from the worst I've seen today." He thinks he hears the problem child mutter, "Should have made you wear Dobby's CRP top," and the child on the supervillain's lap asks as low as she can, "What's a CRP top?" That isn't particularly reassuring. One would expect a certain standard of dress from the most prestigious hero school in the country. An unimpressed supervillain, how lovely. Shoyuta is going to need a drink by the time today ends. The students have a strict uniform policy they must adhere to unless their quirk or something else makes them unable, then appropriate alternatives are provided. Shoyuta explains. However, we had made no mention of a dress code requirement when arranging these parent-teacher meetings, and it was not expected for the parents to show up particularly well presented. And then, because he is tired and maybe just a little self-destructive, if you'd like to talk more about our uniform policy, then perhaps our first topic of conversation should be about your son's ability to tie a tie. Or lack thereof. In the corner of his eye, Shoyuta notes that Yagi seems to be reaching to put a bloodied hand over his mouth. Probably to get him to stop talking. Too bad. Shoyuta moves away from the hand. It is a well-known fact that he's been digging his own grave long before he decided to help out teenage vigilantes and turn a blind eye to their criminal organizations. "Ah yes." Midoriya Hisashi acknowledges. A regretful sigh. "My son takes after me in many ways. Yagi makes some concerning noises, like a dying weasel on steroids, but unfortunately I could never convince him of the importance of making oneself look presentable. I own my own business, you see, and the first step to maintaining successful interactions is in conveying the power you hold. Of course, I love my son all the same, and he certainly has the potential to inherit the family business. Really, I was rather surprised to learn he ended up in the hero course of all things." The word hero is said with such disdain Shoyuta can almost taste the rot in the supervillain's voice. And of course, it's those words that flip the switch in the coworker sitting next to him. Izuku sees the moment his dad pushes too far. Really, he can't take the man anywhere. He sees the moment All Might forgets there is a young, timid child cradled safely on his dad's lap. And sure, his dad can take care of both himself and Eri easily enough without the girl coming to any harm, but that doesn't mean he wants that next one for all versus all for one battle to take place in the middle of his high school or in front of Eri. She's been traumatized enough. There would be no high school left, and he's pretty sure the required repairs would make Cementos cry. So he moves, a quick mashup of quirks with one for all backing them, to pull Eri off his dad's lap and to safety on the other side of the room before anyone has the chance to so much as blink. In that same moment, All for One takes note of All Might's movements, of the girl who is no longer on his lap, and then of the glowing red eyes of the man who is his son's favorite teacher. He takes a calculated hit to the face. There is enough force in it to send him tumbling backwards out of his chair, but nowhere near enough to blast him to pieces. Thank God for erasure. His hands itch go get hold of that quirk himself. That handshake would have been the perfect opportunity. Or perhaps not. Izuku would probably give him the look of disappointment if he did. He doesn't like disappointing the boy. Eraser head. Yagi growls as Shuta's capture weapon holds him back. Shoyuta knows he'd have no hope of continuing to restrain the other hero if he blinked. Even now it is difficult. The man is a monster in strength even with his innards destroyed. His eyes itch. Let me go. You must understand, that man is Shoyuta sighs. As soon as this is over he's getting coffee. Yagi, you've just assaulted the parent of one of my students. I'm not letting go until you calm down and the situation has been de-escalated. That man is a villain. A dangerous one. He cannot be allowed to roam free. He is the parent of one of my students. Shoyuta repeats. Villain or not, He is here to discuss his child's progress in school. He notes movement on the floor, the supervillain making a show of rubbing his already swelling cheek as he slowly sits up. The problem child and the other kid are both by his side now, looking at his injury. His student looks far more exasperated than worried. That's probably a good sign? Seeing the two children by the fallen man's side must strike something in Yagi. The strain on Shuta's capture weapon lessens until there is no longer any need for him to be using it. But he, the number one hero, starts looking lost. Weakly, he's wearing a wig. And so the supervillain is. It's crooked now, hanging to the side to reveal the short white hair beneath. Another thing my son insisted I do before coming. The supervillain brings a hand up to ruffle Aries' hair, then the problem child's, before moving to his feet and dusting himself off. Really, I can't say I'm impressed by what just happened, but I do appreciate your intervention, Eraserhead. I can see why my son likes you. I'd like to apologize for the actions of my coworker. Shoyuta says. I'd ask you not to press charges, but I think that's pointless. The supervillain laughs. Yes. Unfortunately, there wouldn't be much point in doing so. Heroes get away with so much these days. Why, even the number 2 is still getting away with dash. Dad, the problem child cuts in, please stop antagonizing All Might. He's going into shock. It says something about his students that wasn't the worst parent-teacher meeting of the week. At least when Bakugo walks into the room with his parents, Shoyuta has had the chance to learn from his past mistakes and messages Kurogiri to warp him a coffee. Spiked with whiskey, of course. They're once again sitting in the office adjacent to the teacher's lounge. Mentor and student sitting across from one another in a tense silence. Yagi, after panicked calls to Gran Torino and Neomesa, has had time to calm down. To think about this rationally. To squash down the feeling of betrayal that just keeps bubbling up no matter how many times he tells himself there must be an explanation. Young Midoriya is a good kid, damn it. Young Midoriya. He starts. The pause. He is very out of his depth. There are two possibilities here, and he does not like either of them. Are you aware that your father is the villain all for one? The boy blinks at him. He's not technically my father dash, oh thank God. But yes, I did know. There's that betrayal bubbling up again. Or is that blood? Yagi coughs. It's both. Why did you never mention it? His successor shrugs, casual. Like his father isn't the worst villain Yagi has ever come across. Like the man hasn't killed everyone for all successor before the 8th. Like the boy knows, and just doesn't care. Like the boy is just like his father. You never asked. The original fuckendeavor was Fuyumi all along. How'd you find out, little bro? She posted a video of herself hitting Dad with a cast iron pan. She even gave a peace sign at the end. Dabi makes a note to pay their sister a visit sometime. And to maybe bring a peace offering.